Hi everybody, I hope you're all doing really well. Back today to talk about some of my favourite things from the summer months. Talking majority about non-bookish things, but I always like to start these videos with a couple of books that I've been particularly loving. And for this season, both of them are historical fiction. First off, of course, I had to mention The Trouble with Mrs Montgomery Hurst by Katie Lumsden, set in the early Victorian period and centred around this little fictional county of Wickenshire, who end up absolutely reeling at the discovery that one of their most eligible bachelors has decided to get married, but to somebody that they don't know. The first big scandal. And secondly, to a widow who has children, and everybody is just wondering, why on earth would he have gone for her? And so this story is built up through lots of different characters' POVs. We're really getting to see this county gossip, constructing different narratives about what might have gone on, but we're also getting to get a little snapshot into their individual lives and how they function and operate within the society. And it is just a brilliant piece of historical fiction. I particularly love how strong the character work is in this book. Seeing these different figures and their relationships to each other, how they act under stress, not always in the best ways. And yeah, if you are a fan of Jane Austen or Elizabeth Gaskell, then I highly recommend checking this out. My second piece of historical fiction takes us back a little bit earlier and transplants us to Venice in the early 1700s, and it is The Instrumentalist by Harriet Constable. Now, this is a book that I actually haven't had a chance to talk about because it just came out, but I snapped this up straight away, read it, and just absolutely devoured it. In this book, we are following Anna Maria, who has been brought up as an orphan, but the difference with her orphanage is that actually they train up the young girls that are sent there as musicians. And we learn pretty early on that she is a very, very gifted violinist who ends up catching the eye of young up-and-coming Antonio Vivaldi. He takes her on as a student, and they have this very intense teacher-student dynamic, which starts to become sinister as it becomes clear that he is starting to steal her work. And it was interesting how this book was both very evocative and atmospheric of early 18th century Venice, while at the same time you still feel stifled because these girls are pretty much isolated and kept within their orphanage. They don't really get a chance to venture outside. Once again, the character work in here is great. We're seeing this girl as she grows up from around about age 6 up into her late teens, and seeing her drive and ambition, but how this ambition can come at great personal cost, particularly when it comes to throwing some of her friends under the bus, all in pursuit of her great aims of becoming a great composer. And yeah, more on this to come. I really enjoyed this book, and we'll have to talk about it in depth some other time. In terms of film and TV that I've been really enjoying, of course, House of the Dragon season 2 came out in the summer, and as somebody who, you know, just has like passing knowledge of the lore around Dance of Dragons, I know that there's been a lot of controversy about this season, and I definitely agree generally with people who said that the finale was a bit of a disappointment. It didn't feel like a finale. It felt like we were gearing up to another episode and then suddenly it just finishes. But generally I did really enjoy this season. I actually liked that it was a bit of a slower pace, that we weren't just rushing into war, and that actually getting a chance to see these characters and how they will do whatever they can to kind of avoid war, getting more of a glimpse into their personalities and their psychologies, though I can completely understand if people weren't expecting that they would be disappointed. But no, I'm thoroughly enjoying House of the Dragon. Another medieval inspired piece of media that I watched for the first time was A Knight's Tale with Heath Ledger, which I believe originally came out in 2001, but I hadn't seen until now. And this is just such good fun. So as I say, it stars Heath Ledger, who's playing William Thatcher, who is this young man, a peasant, who is squiring for a knight, who is meant to be jousting at a competition, but unfortunately he ends up dying. And so William decides to disguise himself as this knight to compete in order to win the money that would be granted to whoever won the tourney, and then decides that he's going to train himself up even more and pose as a knight in order to keep on winning tournaments. Along the way he ends up meeting Geoffrey Chaucer, who is played by Paul Bettany, who ends up being his hype man. He ends up falling in love, and of course coming up against a villain who seems determined to thwart him. And yeah, like I say, it's just good fun, especially because the movie kind of sets up its vibe and its tone straight away. Kind of like a precursor to Bridgerton, there is anachronistic music played in this movie. Things like We Will Rock You, The Boys Are Back in Town, and that really just sets up the tone and the humour of this movie, but I think works really well. And I think what doesn't hurt is that it has a lot of heart. There were moments in this movie that I did genuinely start crying, as well as laughing. And so yeah, I feel like even though I've only seen this the one time, and the first time I'm seeing this is at age 29, I feel like this movie might actually become a bit of a comfort movie for me. I also have found out that they're going to be staging this as a jukebox musical in Manchester come next year, so I'm quite keen to see this, or at least wait until it comes to London. But yeah, I can't believe it's taken me until now to watch this. Moving swiftly on to fashion favourites, of course, it has been the summer, so I've been enjoying getting to wear my summer dresses. And my actual favourite is not the piece of clothing that I'm going to be showing you, but not too far off, because I actually ended up enjoying this piece of clothing so much that I bought a second version of it. This one still has the tag in, but it is this lovely, almost floor length blue floral dress, which has slightly puffy sleeves and kind of a heart neckline. It's from Anne the stories. I got my original dress in the sale. It was half off from its original price, but I have worn it so much that I ended up buying a second one. Any nice occasion or just generally a nice day, I've been wearing this. I just find it really flattering and really pretty. Like, if anybody wants to draw me as a cartoon character, can you draw me in this dress, please? I always think it's a good sign of a piece of clothing if you buy a second version of it. A bit of a miscellaneous favourite for me has been pink lemonade Magnums. I've been trying to be quite healthy and mindful with the food that I'm eating the last few months. However, it is summer and cake and ice cream are my favourite foods, so I wasn't going to completely deprive myself of them. And when I've been feeling in the mood for an ice cream, these Magnums have just been so great. It's like all of my favourite things in one. So to start off with, we've got the white chocolate on the outside, which has popping candy, and then inside it's a combination of lemon ice cream and then raspberry sorbet. And I mean, I'm just salivating thinking about it. But yeah, it's just all of my favourite things just wrapped up into one perfect ice cream. And now I really want one. So I hope these aren't limited edition, but if they are, then I'm gonna have to stock up because I really like these. A podcast that I've been really enjoying is the No More Late Fees podcast, which is a movie podcast which specialises in films which came out between 1995 and 2005. So things that are very nostalgic to me. First off, they talk about their memories of these films, how much they enjoyed them when they were younger, and then they rewatch them, discuss them, and then decide whether or not they still hold up. They used to work at Blockbuster, and I believe there are like different day rentals, and so they rank them at the end as either this is a movie that you would want to own yourself, a 5-day rental, so one that you really like but maybe isn't perfect, a 2-day rental, so one that yeah you might come back to from time to time but it's nothing special, and then a same-day rental, which is a film that you hate. And yeah, it was just a really nice nostalgic look back, a lot of the time making comments about these films that I love but giving me thoughts about them that I just never had before. So yeah, if you're looking for a fun movie podcast, this is definitely a great one to check out. And then finally, theatre. If you have been following my Instagram account, you will know that I went to London last week and I ended up seeing 10 shows in 6 days, which was quite a lot, but it was very, very enjoyable. So I'm going to very, very quickly try and fly through these shows because they were all very different. Not all of them were favourites, but I feel like it's the best way to talk about them. So first off, I went to see Kiss Me Kate at the Barbican Centre. Kiss Me Kate, which is a Cole Porter musical, which originally came out in 1948, which sees a theatre troupe who are putting on a musical version of The Taming of the Shrew. However, their two main stars, Fred and Lily, are ex-spouses who have been divorced for a year and have this bickering love-hate relationship. But it is very clear that the love part of their relationship is still there. And the entire musical is taking place over their opening night, in which many mishaps and hijinks ensue. This is one that I've been really looking forward to because another favourite of the summer has been the 1999 Broadway cast recording. I've been listening to this non-stop. I think the actual music, the songs in this musical are fantastic. So I find it a shame that I didn't actually really like the book of this musical. I feel like the book does not stand up to the music. And I think part of this is because it is a musical that is definitely kind of aged. You know, we are adapting Taming of the Shrew, which is one of Shakespeare's more controversial plays. The musical originally came out in 1948. You know, the gender dynamics in this play are fraught and they have not aged particularly well. And while this production does try and do a couple of things to play around with the ending to kind of tame it down, to tame the shrew that is this musical, I don't feel like they did quite enough. And it's such a shame because I want the script of this show to match up to the music because the music is stunning, but I think would just need a massive, massive rewrite. I think they would just have to completely change it. Then next up, I saw Two Strangers Carrying a Cake Across New York, which is a really fun show, which is entirely spearheaded by two actors. A British man who meets an American girl who just happens to be the sister of his father's fiance. And he decides upon arriving in New York City for his father's wedding that he's going to take it upon himself to try and help this woman with the task of carrying the wedding cake across New York. We learn lots about these two characters, the tensions in their relationships, struggles that they've had in their lives, but it is very uplifting, very funny, and doesn't necessarily end the way that you think it's going to. It's a shame that this one is due to be closing soon because it is really good fun and just a really fresh modern musical for me, as well as having a lot of heart. Then I saw Hello Dolly at the London Palladium. This is starring Imelda Staunton, and I'm not gonna lie to you, in short, the only reason really to see this show is for Imelda Staunton. I feel like this is another older musical that upon reflection is just not that great. There are a few fun songs in it, but I find the story really weak. I thought much more went on in Hello Dolly than actually does, and that was my mistake for, you know, not having seen the film or having seen another production of it. But I felt like I was just waiting for Imelda Staunton to be on there because I feel like she plays this character very well. She just evokes a lot of emotion, but as a watching experience, the The story was quite dull. I thought the choreography wasn't really that inspired. So yeah, not a favourite for me. Then I saw Next to Normal, which is a musical that I have listened to before. I knew a couple of the songs in it really well, but I'd completely forgotten like major plot points in there, so it was a bit of a surprise for me. But this is a musical that is about this family, and particularly the mental health of the mother. And I don't want to spoil anything for you about this musical, but what I will say is it does get very, very dark. It is very intense, quite brutal. So even though it is a fantastic musical, everybody is performing their roles incredibly well, the music is great, the acting is great, it's not a musical that I would necessarily recommend to just anybody, and I would very heavily recommend looking at the trigger warnings for this show, because as I say, it gets dark very, very quickly. There were people on my row who were crying and hugging each other at the interval because it was so intense. It is one that does get very emotional, and I will never forget having seen this, but yeah, as I say, look up those trigger warnings before you go. Then next I saw a couple of shows at the Globe Theatre, A Comedy of Errors, which I knew absolutely nothing about. I knew no plot points about this, just, you know, the title, so I was expecting hijinks, and that's exactly what I got. I feel like it took the audience about 5 minutes or so to really warm up into this show and to kind of understand the premise, but as soon as everybody kind of cottoned on to what the error of A Comedy of Errors was, we were just having such a great time. It was absolutely hysterical. The actors really, really play into the humour in this, and I had a great time. Antony and Cleopatra was definitely a very different tone. And the unique thing about this particular production is that the actress who is playing Cleopatra is deaf, and I believe only communicates using BSL. And so for this particular show, all of the Egyptians are portrayed only using BSL, whereas it is just the Romans who are speaking English. There are subtitles throughout the entire show, and there are some characters who use both. So for example, Antony uses both, but there are some characters, particularly ones who are interpreting and translating, who use both interchangeably, and it's a really interesting way of portraying the show, portraying like cultural differences between the Egyptians and the Romans, and also like interpretation, political machinations of what is kept hidden and what we reveal publicly. I thought it was a really, really interesting take on Antony and Cleopatra, and I think it's important that we don't just tell the same story in the same tired way. I don't think it was perfectly done, but I feel like it was a really thought-provoking theatrical experience for me. Then I saw Cabaret at the Playhouse, which is now dubbed the Kit Kat Club, while the show is running. This is a show that I have put off watching again and again, mainly because I knew how expensive the tickets were. But what I will say about this show is that I had tickets as far back as possible and as far to the side, like the most restricted view that I could have gotten, and I still had a very, very clear view. So I will say, if you do go to see the show, whatever seat you get in that theatre will be worth it. I don't think there is a bad seat in that venue, and I had a great time with the show, looking at the last months of Weimar Germany, following this eccentric group of performers headed up by the MC, and particularly looking at the relationship between one of their performers, Sally Bowles, and her relationship with an American expat author called Cliff, as Cliff seems to be one of the only ones who is actually realising what's happening in their country and the terrifying political ramifications of what's to come. This has been on for years, it has been highly commended, and I can completely see why. The performers in this are absolutely fantastic and really build up the atmosphere in that room, and the atmosphere of Cabaret is evoked as soon as you walk in the building. Definitely plan to arrive at the theatre a little bit earlier, because it is a very immersive experience. You've got performers who start as soon as you walk in. But yeah, I wasn't sure what my emotional reaction was going to be to this show, and I was very surprised to find myself crying, particularly with what happens with the plotline of one of the Jewish characters, Herr Schultz. I just felt really, really sad for him, and especially at the end he talks about, you know, this will pass, bad things happen but they always do pass, and I just couldn't help thinking the ramifications of what is probably most likely going to happen to him, and I just started tearing up, because you know that it's most likely not going to end up well for him. Like, Cliff is urging him to get out of the country and he is in complete denial about it, and I was tearing up because I was thinking, like, go, leave, this is not going to end well for you. You know, behind the glitter and the performance and the songs is this story of people in complete denial about the political reality of where they live, and just sweeping it under the carpet and saying, no, it's all going to be fine, and when you know that it's not going to be. It just really got me. The next couple of shows that I saw were shows that I'd already seen before. First off, Guys and Dolls, which you know that I love. This is going on at the Bridge Theatre, but sadly it is closing in January, so if you do get a chance to go to London, I really highly recommend going to see this show. Whether or not you go for the immersive standing experience or whether you sit, I was sat for this performance. I had pretty good seats, I was able to see pretty much everything, but just the energy of this show, the humour in it, the romance, the music is fantastic, the performers are great, so I just really recommend going to see Guys and Dolls. I also saw Phantom of the Opera, which was fantastic, despite the fact that I was on some of the highest seats in that theatre. I was higher even than the chandelier, but it was one of those that I could just kind of turn my brain off and enjoy, because I know that I enjoy Phantom, I know I love this music. You know, it's romantic, it's tragic, it's melodramatic, as all the great Andrew Lloyd Webber shows can be, and I had a very good time. The final show I have to talk about, unfortunately, unfortunately was not a favourite, so I'm going to try and speed through this. But the last show that I saw was Starlight Express, which is currently playing at the Wembley Troubadour, and people told me not to go see it. They told me I wouldn't enjoy it, people who, you know, had previously seen Starlight Express when it first came out, and I don't want to say they were right, but yeah, I did not have a good time at this show. So the premise of this show is that all of the performers are trains being played with by a young girl, and they're all racing against each other. And you know, the fun gimmick of this show is that all of the performers who are playing trains are doing so on rollerblades, and so they're rollerblading all around you, and it is very cool to see. But I just found myself losing patience with the premise of this show very quickly. I understand that this is meant to be written as if it's like a 6-year-old child who is playing with these pieces, and therefore, you know, the lyrics do reflect that, but I found it so grating how bad the lyrics were, and yeah, no. I couldn't stand it. I don't know. I feel like if you're going with very young children, then, you know, they'll have a great experience. But for myself, as somebody who has no nostalgia attached to Starlight Express, who was seeing this show for the first time at age 29, yeah, not for me. It's definitely got its audience, that's just not me. I feel bad ending on that one. I feel like it's a favourites video. I should end with fun. But there we go. Those are all of my favourite things from the past few months, including a couple of things that weren't my favourite, but it's fine. It's all theatre. Theatre is always a favourite. Do let me know if any of your favourites from the summer months. I would love to hear from you. Particularly let me know if you have seen any of the shows that I went to see and what you thought about them. I would love to hear from you. I hope you're having a fantastic, fantastic day, and I look forward to talking to you again soon. Thanks. Bye.